Hey, folks. Hi, everyone. As you guys come on in, gosh, it's nice to see familiar faces and some new ones and some very familiar faces. Hello, Kaya. As you guys come on in, I'm going to encourage you to keep your camera on so we can see each other. I'd encourage you to keep your view to gallery so you can see one another. And I'd ask you to keep your mics muted for the time being. Later on in the program, we'll be able to switch that up as we ask questions. Before we get going with the program, I do want to let you know, I guess best practices says that we should ask permission to record, and I need to be more honest than best practices and tell you we're already recording. I'm committed to making sure that folks who can't make these sessions have a chance to see them. So we will be recording. If that makes you uncomfortable, then I suppose that will influence how much you participate, but I hope you'll stick with us. We're gonna be moving ahead just after a couple of introductions. I wanna ask a couple of my colleagues in admissions to let me introduce them. I'm gonna ask them to wave their hands so you can see who they are. Brian Quarrier is waving now. He's the fellow with the beard. Both hands are waving. He's class of 05 at Putney. He's one of our admission counselors. And Jessa Harger, who's waving more, in a restrained, smiling way with one hand. She's waving to us from Brattleboro, another admission counselor. And I wanted to make sure that you guys knew who they were in case you're in the earlier part of the admission process. These are folks that you might very well have a chance to be working with. My name is John Baringos, and I get to serve as Director of Admission and Financial Aid at Putney, which is a treat most days, 9 out of 10 days. I love it. And I'm delighted to introduce my boss, our head of school, who's going to take the baton for a moment, Emily Jones.
Hi, everybody. It's great to see all of you on this freezing cold Saturday afternoon. I'm just going to try to tell you really quickly what project weeks are about. I think you're all here because you're curious about what our kind of project-based learning really looks like. It comes from the basic idea that you learn better if you actually are doing it yourself rather than you're being told how to do it. And if you take as your premise that you can't learn to ski sitting in a classroom, there's an awful lot of other things that you can't learn to do sitting in a classroom. You want to actually try to do them and learn it by trying. The second piece of it is that you want to, as students, I am assuming, have some say about your education and what it is you're curious about, what it is you want to know, and be able to do that yourself and not have that be driven by how many other people want to do the exact same thing, so they made a course out of it, but just something that you're really passionate about and care about. So my husband has a project with a student who's wanting to study Dante's Inferno. There are just not that many kids that want to do that, but this means that he could spend 2 weeks doing that. Lots of different options. You'll hear the term project-based learning all over because it's kind of a fad these days, but mostly what schools are doing is sort of a recipe-based learning so that all the kids in the class are doing the same project at the same time. And this teacher already knows how it's going to come out. This is really different. At Putney, students have 2 weeks at this time of year and 2 weeks in the spring to do anything they propose to do. And they're driving that by their own curiosity. And a lot of it has to do with figuring out how to be your own boss as you're doing your learning. So learning how to adjust as you go along. And so you're going to hear today a bunch of students just telling you what they're doing and what it looks like to try to figure out how to do this with the help of a faculty member that you have selected, but basically your own work and your own project. I'm working with a freshman who is doing this for the first time. He's never seen it done. He's brand new. And on about day 3, when we met, he said, actually, I'm only going to do the first half of this. And I'm going, thank God he came to that conclusion early on, because his project was way too big and he can do the rest of it next time. But I hadn't told him that ahead of time. I wanted him to come to that conclusion, which he did, right? So listen for those kinds of things in the stories that people are telling you at this point. I'm going to leave it at that, and we can move on.
Thanks, Emily. Okay, so we're gonna go through a format just so you know what's coming. You're gonna hear from a student, and their faculty sponsor may toss in a few thoughts or reflections about what they've seen at the end of the student's remarks. And we're gonna move from student to student. I'll call out their name. So you guys are sitting tight and absorbing. And as we get to the end of them, then we'll flip into a Q&A. I hope you guys are having fun. You should see, and you should scroll through the pages to see one another, because it's great to see all of you here. So we're gonna start out with Leighton. And Leighton, if you would unmute and introduce yourself and dive in, and I will give you a cue if time becomes an issue.
Sure. So I'm Leighton. I'm a sophomore at Putney and a day student. I've been here for, well, obviously 2 years, and I've been through 2 project weeks, and this is my 3rd project week. So what I'm doing is, in July, I began raising lambs and pigs for our family. And, you know, I decided in about September that I wanted to base my project week around the harvesting of those animals. You know, I've come to the conclusion through, primarily, honestly, through learning from faculty members at Putney, how important real food is. And, you know, that's definitely something we value at Putney. You know, it's one of the reasons we have the dairy farm on campus. So, you know, I decided that sorry, that I would harvest these animals, process them, package them, and journal and photograph that entire experience. So, you know, we started on Monday, and you know, Monday was just kind of a setup day, and then we harvested the animals. I won't go into much detail for those who probably don't want to hear about that, but, you know, and then for the last couple of days, I've been butchering those animals, which has been, you know, an extremely educational process. You know, I never really realized how much work goes into procuring your own food. You know, because it's really easy to, you know, to go to the supermarket and to, you know, pick up a little packaged, weighed, and labeled piece of meat. So yeah, really, I've been working to bring myself away from the, you know, the industrialization of food. It's something that definitely, you know, has concerned me in the past, but I've never been able to confront it. How, you know, how, I guess, you know, far we've gone from the past. And actually something that my sponsor, Noah, was saying to me, you can probably see him somewhere. You know, I'd been talking to Noah about how, you know, how strange it was for me to be handling the animals that, you know, I'd been raising when I got them. You know, they were like 30 pounds, and, you know, when at the time of their death, they were about 350 pounds. So I was telling Noah about how strange that was, and something that he brought up that, you know, has stuck with me is that, at least substantially, you know, historically, it's a lot more strange where we are right now in the age of not having to think about where your food comes from. You know, that's a lot more strange than the concept of raising and procuring your own food. So I went into this project week definitely, you know, with the idea that it would be, you know, fun and interesting, but I've definitely left it. Well, I will leave it. We're not done yet, but you know, I'm definitely learning just how valuable it is to explore where your food comes from. And I'll pass it over to John. But
Leighton, quick follow-up question before I ask Noah to weigh in.
Sure.
It sounds like a really substantial exertion. You're doing a lot of work, physical work, and you're learning a lot, especially for kids who've not done this kind of thing before, project-based learning. And for parents who are
Right.
wondering about how this fits into a school, what is it that you do to demonstrate your learning? Are you writing a paper at the end or doing a video? Or like, how do you bring closure to it and kind of show Noah that you've done what you set out to do?
Right. So what I'm going to be doing is I've been journaling in my notebook with everything that I'm doing, and then I'll collect all of that information, put it all together and either print it or handwrite it. And I also have photographs, but something that's great about this format of project specifically is that I can just talk to Noah about what I'm doing and we can work through it as it goes so that, it's not the day before project week's over and I'm thinking, I'm not ready to present this, but what I've been doing is just documenting everything I do and then I'll put it all together.
That's a huge help. Thank you. Noah, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I think that in terms of the product of learning piece, one of the things about the ambitious project that Leighton's taken on is having seen the animals before he started. When we see that freezer full at the end of the project, the work and learning will be evident in that project. Not everything necessarily has to be about documenting with writing or even essays and that kind of thing. So it doesn't have to, the work is evident in the project. I think the other thing that I really wanted to pull out, particularly for our visitors, that Leighton and I haven't talked about yet, but that is really, really exciting to me about this project, is connecting the dots from his Project Week work last year, where he was making handmade fishing lures to this pork and lamb slaughtering and butchering project, which don't necessarily, they're not the same project, certainly, but there's a thread there about Leighton, about your connection and your experience with other living things on this planet, and about your food system, both wild caught as well as home raised, that I think has some really interesting ideas and really interesting potential, not only for future project weeks, but also for work in your senior year. So I think that there's some really interesting stuff that's bubbling up in terms of the long-term trends in your independently designed work. And I think that that's something to think about for those of you visiting us today. We really are excited to see this sort of long-term interest and interest expressed in different ways, and finding ways to foster that in our students. And I think Leighton's work is a great example of sort of a longer-term idea or passion developing in a number of different projects over time.
Cool. Thank you very much, Noah. We're going to switch over to Jonas Rice. Jonas?
Hello, I'm Jonas Rice. There's two of us Jonases, and I'm a junior. My project week is making a horror fiction podcast with a group of friends. It's an idea that we actually came up with in the summer, and it's changed quite a bit since then, but the core is still there. It essentially involves research into New England folklore, because all of our stories, while they are in a more modern setting, have some sort of historical roots. Writing a plot, like an overarching plot, to give the stories more of a connection, and then writing an actual script, recording, and we're all going to be voice acting in the podcast, and then of course editing the podcast and creating cover art for it. So it's quite a large project, and that's kind of why there's 4 of us total working on it. So, and we've split up the tasks so each person can focus more on the parts that they're more individually interested in. Like some people who are really into research and history and more writing informational papers have been taking on most of the research, while I've been working more on the script writing and developing a plot. Our project week is going very well so far. We've managed to stay on schedule, which I'm honestly kind of surprised by, seeing as it's pretty large. We're creating 4 whole episodes, which is a lot for 2 weeks. And at the beginning of this week, I was very intimidated by the project just because it's so large and so sort of results based. But after getting started, it seems a lot less scary. You just kind of start with the little tasks, and then you move on, then you have a finished product. And that watching that process is really fascinating to me. And it's definitely harder to be doing this online, but it's still possible. Like I'd prefer to be in a room with people, but we can still like work around that with a lot of like Zoom meetings and text and a, a whole lot of communication. This project week is the first time I'm doing like a more independent project. Like this entire project was created by students because I usually work on theater tech, which means, you know, doing the lights and or sound for the play or musical. But obviously, since we're online, I wasn't able to do that. So this project week has kind of helped me become more independent in creating projects like without as much guidance from teachers. And that really allows you to make a project that's more suited to you. Yeah.
Jonas, that was really, thank you very much for sharing that. I told you I might ask you a follow-up question about how it was to work with a group, and that's exactly what I want to do. Because I want to underscore, like, one of the things that can be great about a school experience is how we learn about who we are in a group, how we learn about our strengths and our challenges in collaborating with other people. And it seems like, although you referred to connecting with a bunch of friends for this podcast, it seems like a lot of design work would have to happen with people, you know, talking through different ideas and notions and perhaps strongly held opinions, and negotiating. And I'd love to hear you share a little bit with us about how that part of the process worked, especially since you said, I think that you started thinking about this quite a while ago.
Yeah. It is difficult to communicate like very openly with people, especially online. But I think actually already knowing each other has let us be more like honest with each other. Like we're not like afraid that they're gonna get mad because like we all respect each other's opinions and we all understand we have the same goal of creating a good podcast out of this. Like, it is it's always difficult to work with a bunch of other people when you all have like your own individual sort of vision for the project. But we ask each other for a lot of input. Like we've all been working on everything at least a little bit together. Like we've all been working on the plot and getting each other's feedback, and then we all go through and edit the script together so that no one feels like left out. Like so that everyone's like input shows through in the final product. Yeah.
That sounds really cool. Seth, do you want to weigh in?
Maybe just briefly, I want to let people know, just so you know the scope of this, that yesterday they shared documents with me that there's like I think there were like 34 pages of total stuff. Am I right about that, Jonas?
It's something like that. We haven't counted.
There's a
really.
lot of stuff there right now. I'm wondering, I'm curious if I can ask a question. I don't know your answer to this. Like for you, which part of doing this has been the most, like you talked about being a little intimidated early on. What's the most intimidating part?
It's the intimidating part is just how much we wanted to create because it is a pretty ambitious project and but like because we have so many people working on it we can just divide and conquer sort of and hopefully come up with something by the end. Yeah.
That's great.
Seth, any more? You've got a little time if you want it. Okay.
Well, John, I was gonna just ask about the thing you asked about with the group work. I think like I'm so interested. Jonas alluded to this, but you haven't really done the traditional project week route yet, and you're a junior and you've been here since freshman year. And I guess like I am wondering a little bit also just is this like sparking ideas for other projects for you already, or how are you feeling about that?
Yeah, it is really fun to experience doing something like all yourself, like completely student based, because I missed out on I spent most of my project weeks doing theater, and then I missed out on one project week because I was studying abroad. But this does make me really want to try doing more independent projects. Like, I don't have any specific ideas yet, but I know that the process will be very fun.
That's really cool to hear. That's really lovely. Okay, we're switching gears and we're moving to Desi, who on my screen is dead center. I don't know where they are on yours.
Hi, I'm Desi. I'm a sophomore and I'm a boarding student at Putney. And for my project week, I'm reading in a group project. I'm reading The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. And it's about three brothers, Alyosha, Ivan, and Dmitri, just navigating, I think it's set in the 1860s. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nathan. Just, navigating like guilt and morality and religion specifically, because Alyosha is a monk. And we just read The Grand Inquisitor, where Ivan talks. I don't want to give any spoilers, so I won't say that. Yeah, it's been really fun. We read about like 60 to 80 pages a night, and then the next day we talk about what we read, and we're supposed to only talk for an hour, but it's a thick and dense book, and there's so much to talk about that we do often go over the hour, which I think is great. And it's been a really I did Nathan's Russian lit project last year when we read Anna Karenina, and it's been, sorry, I got my cat here. It's been really great to work with Nathan, and the group that I'm in is really incredible. They're full of it's full of my friends, and I'm really enjoying it. And it's really nice to have these like discussions with people who want to have these discussions versus in a classroom setting. Maybe not everybody's super interested in the book. And yeah. John, do you want to say anything, Nathan?
Desi, of course I do. And I love it when you land on the "and yeah," it to me is an invitation. I wonder if you can share with folks a little bit about how, if you were to step out of yourself and think, I've done more than one project week, I've got a little bit of experience here, even though it was with the same teacher with another really big challenging book. At least it sounds intimidating to me. Like, who are you as a student who's making use of a project week that's different today maybe than when you first came to Putney?
Yeah, I think when I first came to Putney, Putney really encourages people to step out of their comfort zones. And I did that by doing my first project week with Nathan. And I was also double timing the projects. I was in the play, which is a project week, and I was doing Nathan's project. So it was a lot of time spent doing, but it was really, I don't know, I am Russian, but I'd never read any Russian lit. So it was really eye-opening to like read and discuss these books that like my parents raved about, and like my aunt and uncle were always recommending me to read, but I was always so intimidated by them because like they're large. There's a lot of like pages in the book. But it was nice to have a non-stressful setting to really like learn and understand the text. And now that I've done it before in my second project week, I'm much more excited to talk about it. And I'm less nervous reading, and I'm like not trying to like shove every hidden meaning down my throat. I'm just like taking notes in my little notebook as I go along. And it's just been really like very intellectually stimulating. I feel like that's a very nerdy thing to say, but
Nerdy is good. Nathan, do you want to jump in?
Sure, I'll say a couple. So I, like a lot of the faculty members here, I think we have interests that are broad and varied. So I think it's always fun for me to see what different faculty members are offering. And I do lots of other kinds of projects, but every once in a while I do like to offer group projects. And so I don't know if everyone's gotten that message, but we do have, usually each department offers one group project that is something that's sort of loosely created by the faculty member, and students can join. And oftentimes it's the younger students who will do it, especially for the first time, because they're just sort of seeing what a project is all about. And so, but in this project I have now, it is upper class students, and I don't know if that's just means the nature of the book, but every once in a while I do like to offer a really big novel, and there's several reasons for that, but one of them is we have students who love to read, and we don't always get the opportunity to do these sort of really large novels in our curriculum just because there's not enough time. And so students will sometimes, those who really, really love literature I've heard, them sort of bemoan that and say, I want to read this really, really big book. And so I did one last year on Anna Karenina. I did one with Seth where we partnered up, and we read with about 10 students in the spring when we were all online. We read Moby Dick together. And I think the thing that's interesting about reading a lengthy text is, and I think this is true for all projects, every time a student does a project here, there's the project that they're doing, and then there's this sort of meta project that happens at the same time where they're reflecting on what a project is and how much they can bite off, and what happens when they encounter failure or a setback in a project. And that all actually happens, I think, when people are reading large texts where they come in and they're really gung-ho and they're really excited, and then suddenly they're like 30 pages behind. And how do they work with that? And what do they learn about themselves as a reader? So it is, I think it does, even though it might not seem on the surface like it's a project to read a book in the same way that, like, building a bicycle or something else where you have something concrete at the end. I think you sort of go through all of the same sort of psychological stages that you would on any kind of project. And you have this real sense of accomplishment, I think, if you put yourself fully into it. And I think most of my students who will do texts with me every once in a while really feel like great about what they did. And then I think it gives them a kind of confidence going forward that there's not really a text that they couldn't do this on their own. It is great to do it with a group of people and to have that kind of support, but really it's you and the text, and the hours you're spending each day reading it. And so I think you leave that with this sort of confidence that no matter how difficult or long a text is, you can sort of make an approach into it. So anyway, that's
Nathan, thank you. And you've
great.
gotten the chance to work with Desi on 2 of these projects we hear.
Yeah, and so
you've got about a minute. Can you reflect a little bit about how you've seen Desi make this journey?
Yeah. So, Desi, last year when I did the Anna Karenina one, and I should say that this year, this Brothers Karamazov was not my idea. Several students come to me and say, "Hey, would you be willing to do another big Russian novel?" And I said, "Sure, of course." But Desi did this last year, and they were in the play. And I think when Desi came to me, I was like, "I want to be in your Anna Karenina project week." I said, "You're totally out of your mind because the play is already considered a double project week." And Desi was like, no, I really want to do it. And somehow Desi did it, right? Couldn't make it to every meeting. But just what is amazing, I think, about Desi is how much they love this stuff. And I think, Desi mentioned that they're Russian, right? And so I think it's sort of a way of doing a kind of ethnic research, right? And but this time Desi's been there the whole time, and so it's just been really great. One of the things that I notice is the kinds of questions that they ask, really demonstrating that Desi is really learning to unpack a text in a really analytical and meaningful way. So that's rewarding to see, to see the students become more sophisticated in how they approach a text.
Thank you so much.
Nathan.
This,
You're welcome.
this is going so on schedule. I've got a big smile inside. We are about to switch over to Eliza Kaufman, wherever Eliza is. There you are. Are you ready?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Hi, I'm Eliza. I'm a freshman. This is my first project week. And I am translating the poetry of Gabriela Mistral. That's her pseudonym. Her actual name is Lucila Godoy Alcayaga, if you want to check her out. Great poetry. So what I'm doing is exactly what it sounds like. I'm taking a book of her poetry and I'm essentially randomly choosing poems and translating them line by line with a Spanish English dictionary. And when I first thought up this idea, I was like, this is a great idea. And then I went through several phases where I was doubting myself and thinking this is going to be horrible. And I was like, no, this is going to be great. And it was going to be like, no, it's going to be horrible. And then I actually got into this project and it's actually really fun. It's a little, the first time I translated a poem, it took me like 3 hours and it was 20 lines. But as I've gotten on, it's a lot easier to find the words to, because I have that remembrance of, oh, I learned this word with this poem. I know what this word means now. And something I definitely wasn't expecting from it is that there's really no right answer in translation. I thought that it was just going to be like translating it word for word and that it was going to be easy and there was going to be a right answer. But there isn't a right answer. And that kind of terrifies me because it's not just translating the words, it's translating the meaning. And that is very scary because that's why there are multiple translations of every text. And I never realized that because I don't know. It's just so weird. And then once I'm done translating the poems, I've got about 8 done. I thought I was going to have less than 7. I have 8. I think that's a very good thing. I'm going to read them out loud and just talk about my process. And that's going to be my final presentation thingy. So yeah.
Eliza, thank you. I love the reference to the presentation thingy. Tell me, if you would, tell our visitors, how many project weeks have you done?
This is my first one.
Right, this is your first one because you just joined our community in September. It's hard to have perspective on what your first one's like in the middle of your first one, but that is precisely what I want to try to get you to share a little bit of. You talk about that you're learning that there's multiple interpretations. It's not always one certain truth. How do you know what project week to build or to select, or how much pressure do you feel around that process?
I felt so much pressure when I was trying to come up with my project week. I was just terrified because I was thinking I need to get the best idea, the perfect idea that I'm going to absolutely love. And I went back and forth between various ideas before settling on this one. It was very difficult to choose it and, just make sure that it was right.
Was it a solo? Did you feel that pressure all on your own, or did you connect with friends who were wrestling with the same kind of pressure?
I think quite a few people also felt it. But I'm generally a very anxious person, so it was kind of just me being hard on myself. And I talked to a bunch of people who had done it before, and they were like, you're being really hard on yourself. And I was like, I know, but shouldn't I be?
I admire
because I really just wanted it to be perfect. I wanted it to be a good project. And right before the project started, I was absolutely terrified that I was going to hate it and I was going to have to drag myself through. But I don't have to, because I came up with the idea myself. It's my idea.
So when we get to Q&A, other students who've done this before, I hope you'll take a moment somewhere along the line to share whether you felt that kind of pressure too when you were approaching that first project week, because it is such a different way of doing school. Eliza, I want to ask your faculty sponsor, Elena, to jump in. I can't see her on my first screen, but I know, Elena, you're there.
I'm definitely here. Wow, there's so much. I don't think that I have enough time. I'm a talker. It's probably why I teach a language.
I'll cut you off, I promise, if
thank
we
you.
need to. We've got about 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the most, as a sponsor, we look for things like how can we help, how can we sort of guide when needed, how can we, maybe help make limits as needed, but I think in this project with Eliza, I've been doing a lot of observation. I have helped a little bit. I have done a little bit of guidance, but it's been mostly observation. You didn't mention this, but to everybody else, I don't know Eliza outside of this project and then Spanish. She is in my Spanish class. And I do want to mention that for somebody who feels very anxious and somebody who feels perhaps a lot of pressure, Eliza jumped from Spanish 1 to Spanish 3. So that's risky, right? That's not a decision that was taken lightly, and in part was because of just scheduling, right? So because of the scheduling, the decision could have easily been, I'll just stay in Spanish 1 because that's easier, that's less risky. But you took that risk and you're doing phenomenally. Same thing with this project. You were trying to find the perfect project, the one that was going to be exactly right. The same thing with the translations. You want the exact perfect translations, and you run into all of these risks, but you're taking them. And I think that is that's beautiful about Project Week, is seeing students take on those type of risks and really flourish, or basically just learn from them. I don't know, can you talk a little bit about your research, both in the cultural understanding of Gabriela Mistral and then with the language itself, the like grammatical part of it?
Sure, a little bit, I guess. I'm also kind of trying to understand where her poems come from, like what they're written from, the like who she was as a person. So I've done a little bit of research on that. I'm also trying to understand the language at the same time, because there's like verbs, and verbs are confusing because they're regular verbs, and then there are the various verb endings, and then there are like the little bits that you can add on to verbs to change how they would be said in English. Like it's very confusing. And just trying to pick up on that and understand it has been very difficult, but it's been very fun too.
I am so glad you guys were able to make this today. It's so great to have the perspective of someone who's new into the experience. There's no jaded anything, Eliza, and it's really, thank you so much. And thank you, Elena. And we get to move over to our second Jonas Jarecki. There you are.
Hi, yeah, I'm the other Jonas. So this is the third project week I've had at Putney, and 2 of mine have been films. This is one of the films. The film I'm working on right now is called, am I allowed to say the name, John?
I don't see why not. Yeah, you should.
Okay, the film is called Requiem for a Badass Radical.
Oh yeah, definitely, yep.
And it's about a filmmaker named Melvin Van Peebles, who was this Black activist, radical filmmaker who changed Hollywood in a bunch of ways for not doing what they said, basically. And it's about him and his radical ways of making films and just being a person. And so far, I'm in the middle of editing it. I started writing an outline at first to see where to guide my edit to a outcome I would like, but then I realized I would kind of need to edit first before I could see what my outline really needed to be. So I've started doing that. I've gotten pretty far in my first sequence, and so far it's looking good to me. I'm having a lot of fun with this project. This is definitely one of the more fun projects I've done for Project Week, because I know Melvin on a personal level, and I also am doing it for a kind of celebration of him in a few months, which will be fun to show it there. And yeah, I don't know what else I should say about it.
Well, Jonas, I'm going to ask you a follow-up question to give you a little bit more to riff on, because there's more in your journey here. Am I remembering correctly that Project Week, your first Project Week, was part of how you joined the community?
Yeah, it was my first day at Putney was the first day of Project Week.
So therefore, I'd love you to share with folks a little bit about how Project Week has been its own kind of vehicle for you in a different way, and how different is it for you today? Not just because it's a different film that you're making, but because you're a different person and you're now, the community is yours in a different way today than it was literally on your first day.
Yeah, I mean, definitely when I came here on my first day, I was also making a film for Project Week, and I definitely now have a lot more experience with film after taking Andy's class in last semester, and due to the fact that I know more people now, it's easier to like ask for help than it was when I first arrived. So that's a big help so far.
And you seem to be having fun, which is good.
Yeah.
Andy Reichman is the faculty sponsor who works with Jonas. Do you have some thoughts or reflections about this work or this kid?
Sure, yeah. First, let me say that the project weeks that I have supported over the years have run the gamut from rank beginners who had hardly ever touched a camera and maybe had never edited 2 pieces of film together to a more experienced people. And it's always quite an adventure. With Jonas has a lot more under his belt as a young filmmaker than probably any other student I've worked with. He has been working in film and doing things in film for a really long time, which is great. And it means he's quite independent on this project. You know, I'm supporting him in certain ways where he had a couple of technical things that he was trying to accomplish, and I showed him how to accomplish those things. But, you know, his outline, which was, you know, very well put together, clearly indicated that he was headed in a good direction. And then since then, in the editing room, he's looked at that and revised it based on what's actually reality based in the cutting room. And I'm loving the opening ideas that he has incorporated into the film. And one thing that's great, this is something nobody's mentioned, is that there is a 2-way street in Project Week, and we have the opportunity to learn from our students as they take on something that we may not be absolutely familiar with. And so Jonas turned me on to a film of Van Peebles that I had never seen, and it's a really fantastic, interesting look at Black filmmakers and the history of the unfair treatment in Hollywood. And I plan now on showing portions of that film the next time I teach a class. And then totally on another subject, I just wanted to say to Noah, if you need some support in assessing Leighton's project, I'd be really happy to investigate the bacon.
Okay, and on that gastronomic note, this is time-wise, this is going just as I'd hoped it would. I hope you guys, you know, still have energy, you visitors. I want to encourage you to do whatever you do to stretch, stand up, do one of these. Just give yourself 20 seconds to just get some blood going in a different way. Doesn't have to be the kind of modern dance that I'm doing right now, although you're welcome to join me. You can see Emily's doing a lot without showing us, probably with her feet. Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to give you a chance to take a breath and get some circulation going. And I think, Brian, I'm gonna need your help on the chat room, but I think given the scale of the crowd, I think we should just let folks put their first name into the chat, and then we will do our darndest to call you in sequence. If you get excited and have multiple questions, we will try to avoid your second one until we've given everybody else a chance to ask their first one. Some of you already know that routine, but I wanted to be clear about it. Brian, can you help me on this one as we go through?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, cool. So, and you can, guys, you can be students, parents, you can be asking questions to the students who are your best source of information. but behind them, is the faculty sponsor, and they also have the breadth of experience to rely on. Okay, I think Stephanie is the first question. How many hours a day do students work on projects during project week? Are there other activities going on during that time? I can start with there aren't other activities except for eating and socializing. But students, how many hours are you guys putting into your project weeks? Maybe you could answer it this year and in a more conventional year. Jonas?
I'll go.
Yeah.
I mean, supposedly you're supposed to work at least, I think, 4 hours a day on it. I end up forgetting how much I'm supposed to work. Like today, I've been working all day, and I even emailed Andy like asking, aren't we supposed to meet? Because I didn't even realize it was Saturday. So you often just get distracted and go overtime if you're really enjoying your project.
That's cool. Any other student want to add to that, or does that actually capture it for you as well?
Yeah, I can add something. So in a regular year, it would be a lot more structured. We'd have set blocks and set times where we check in with our sponsors, which, I mean, we do have times where we're, supposed to check in with our sponsors, but no, definitely, like, for example, last year, at least I felt, I had designated, I think, 2-hour periods where I was working, but, for example, yesterday, I woke up late, but then worked until midnight making sausages. So it's, for me at least, a little more relaxed.
Leighton, if you need any help with those sausages, taste testing, safety, I'm good for that.
That sounds good. Thank you, John.
Kat, just one sec.
John, real quick.
Just
sorry.
one sec. Kat, I wanted to encourage Kat to ask your question out loud. And Elena, if you want to jump in first, that's okay, or right after?
Yeah, no, it was just for the previous question. Desi had their hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. And I saw Desi and I interrupted Desi because I'd started moving on the next question. Desi, do you want to jump in with that comment, or shall we move on?
No, it's okay.
Cool. Thanks. Sorry. Thanks. Kat?
Has a student ever not followed through with a project because of a reason?
I'm going to ask Emily to answer that question.
I'll take that one. The goal of the projects is to learn as much as possible about what it is you set out to learn. So failure would be defined as not learning anything. And you'd have to try really hard not to learn anything. There are plenty of students over the years who were overly ambitious in their projects and not smart enough to notice that halfway through and modify their goals. And so that it didn't come out where they had anticipated. As long as they can articulate what they learned about themselves as planners, as well as what they learned about themselves in their topic, that's fine, right? We're not looking at the bright, shiny object in a bow. We're looking at the capacity for self-reflection and learning from what you have figured out at that point. There have been students that just blew it off, right? And then they have to wind up making up a project some other time, but that happens fairly rarely.
Thank you, Emily. Kaya, you actually should be first in line because you wrote the question and then you put your name in. So anyway, you're next.
Okay, so my question was what are the steps that you take to get to that? What are the steps? What's the process of deciding your project, and what are the steps you take to get there?
Eliza, I really want you to do this one if you don't mind, because it's freshest for you.
Yeah, so there's a question on the admissions thing that's if you were to do a project week, what would it be?
Right.
And I think that's when I initially started thinking about what project week would I do if I had to do one. And then over the summer after I got admitted, it was what project week did I do? And I have these notes that are written at 2 a.m. about frantic ideas that make no sense. It's mouth, arm, tongue, flower garden. and it's just like chaos. But when I first started like actually thinking about it, like logistically, it was in humans class, humans in the natural world. My teacher was like, it's time to do a diagram. So it's like a little circle, it's the Venn diagram things, and you put your 3 interests in them, and then you see where they overlap. And that's where my like actual logistic possible ideas started to come out. And then just like everywhere I went from there, I started thinking about ideas and thinking about how I would do it. And someone came into our health seminar to talk about it because I am a freshman. We're new. And afterwards, after like the people were talking about it, you get like introduced to Project Week from people who've done Project Week. You can talk to people around you because everybody's very nice at Putney, and you can ask questions, be like, has anybody ever done this before? Like, have they changed this thing? Is it okay if I do this one thing, etc., etc.? So yeah, it's really just like coming up with lots of ideas and then figuring out if you can do it. And then you ask your sponsor, and your sponsor will say yes or no. And then you make an outline. The outlines are very self-explanatory. It's kind of asking, what would you learn from this and how would you do it? And then that's, yeah.
Eliza, thank you. Horace, you have a question.
Yeah, I do. This is for people who have like done Project Week. What like troubles or difficulties have you like come across, and how have you gone and gotten help from teachers, and how have your teachers helped you get over the problems and continue with your project?
That's a great question. I need a volunteer. Which of you has had a problem and is willing to talk about it? I'm sorry, I meant our students. I need a hand up. Desi, you got it up first.
Last year when I was doing the play and Anna Karenina with Nathan, at like one point, it was like, because I mean, Project is kind of all like tech week or like hell week, but like at a certain point, we're spending like all our days down at the theater in Jeffrey Campbell, and we're just like running through things over and over again. And I got like really behind in the reading, which like wasn't actually a problem because I wasn't able to go to the meetings because I was at Jeffrey Campbell all day. But it was, I don't know, it was just like really stressful. I was just like, whatever I would just like put like my book in the wings, and I would be like in full costume, and I would just be like, it was like dark, and I'd be like squinting at the pages of like Vronsky like falling off his horse. And it was just like really, really intense. I wouldn't say that it was like a failure, but it was really intense.
Desi, you described the difficulty, but I wonder if there's a moment where in that difficulty you felt like you needed to talk to Nathan or somebody else about the fact that it was challenging and that you might not be quite on top of it.
Yeah, I mean, I did mention to Nathan that like I was not on top of the readings, and I also talked to our lovely, amazing theater director, Gavi, and I was like, Gavi, what if I read? And he was like, sure. And so he just like ran the scenes out of order so that I was able to like catch up on the reading. And it was
Cool.
really helpful.
That's helpful. Thank you. Leonardo, it's your question. Where are you, Leonardo? Oh, good.
So has a student ever set out to do one thing in Project Week and then found something really interesting that they decided they wanted to, learn more about, and kind of like shifted their project?
I'll offer a quick version, and then I'll ask the faculty sponsor who wants to follow me with a hand. I'm pretty sure that it's not the case that kids can launch a project and then completely switch projects. I think it is very plausible and often happens that they end up doing the project in a different way as they get clear on what it is. But I wonder if Nathan or Noah or Seth or Andy or Elena might have a thought, and just one of you. Nathan, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I think this happens a lot. And, sometimes you get a student who doing a project realizes that they've defined their project in a certain way, but then a few days in, they realize what they're doing, that they're actually something that they thought was sort of marginal becomes the most important thing. And if it's early on in the project, then you can make adjustments. You also sometimes get students who their minds are, maybe this is many of you, your minds become interested in so many different things. And John will remember, this was actually during a senior exhibition, which is sort of like Project Week glorified. We were sort of co-sponsored a former student who, she was so interested in so many different things that like she just kept wanting to add things in and add things in and add things in, and she wanted to create this sort of giant world blast theory, you know, of everything. You know, and she only had a couple months, and we kept saying like, no, you've got to keep it narrow, you've got to keep it narrow. So I think that's one of the skills that you learn, is that inevitably, if you're doing it well during Project Week, you're going to be like, oh, I discovered this thing, and I'm also really interested in that. But then working with your sponsor, you can say, is it realistic to open up that door right now? Or do I sort of check that as something that I will continue to follow up on after my Project Week is over? Because you have to work within the time constraints that you have. So that's a skill that I think that you develop. But the short answer is yes, you discover things all the time. Your interest is piqued in another way. And I think that that's great. And learning how to work with that is one of the skills that we're, so.
Thank you so much, Nathan. Isadora, you've got a question.
No.
My question actually got answered. Thank you.
Oh, do you want to make up a new question?
I'll give it some thought.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Molly, where's Molly? Molly Arnold. Where are you, Molly? Has anyone seen Molly?
Molly's there waving a hand,
Oh,
but
there
I
you are,
can't
Molly.
hear
So-
anything.
Thank you. Molly, we can't hear you, but you can speak up. If you can speak up, you can have a question.
Hello.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Hi. How do you find inspiration for a project?
Do you mean that for the student?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. How do you find inspiration for a project? Leighton, you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. So as I was talking about, my inspiration obviously came from, you know, raising pigs and sheep. You know, and also, you know, I didn't really have a choice but to, you know, deal with them. So I kind of, you know, I took a lot of time to think about, you know, what's important about, you know, raising animals. And I, you know, I did some reading about how, you know, like how disconnected specifically many Americans are from their food. So that kind of just like through like reading and just paying attention to like my own dynamic with food and with livestock kind of just inspired me to take a deeper dive into.
Thank you, Leighton. You know what?
relationship.
What occurs to me is that faculty who've worked with kids over the years might see a variety of ways that kids get inspired. Seth, could you take a stab at that in a pretty short answer?
Yeah, I guess I would just say like I think actually Jonas, who is the student I was sponsoring, had a good answer when he was talking about his project. That I think we're being inspired all the time, but we're not always necessarily paying attention to that inspiration. And I think the fact of Project Week sort of creates a set of circumstances that helps us think about, oh, I'm interested in this thing right now. Maybe I could do a project on that later. So the inspiration isn't necessarily this like scary thing that we don't know how to access, but that we're sort of, because Project Week exists, as we're going through our work in classes, I think you find students tend to be thinking about that stuff from time to time.
Thank you very much. Liliana, you're next.
So I was wondering if a project could be creating a piece of art, like creating a sculpture or doing a series of paintings, or if it could be something that's kind of less typically educational, like less reading and less writing and more of just putting on headphones and painting for 3 hours.
I'm going to let Emily answer that because it will be fun for her to do so.
Yeah, I would guess, I'm guessing here, between a third and a half of the projects are either totally arts-based or have an art component in the way the project is presented. A huge number of the projects are interdisciplinary in some way. And we have what we call gallery walk on the last day of project week, where there's just all over school in 3 or 4 different places, students have put their projects for other people to see in whatever form they are. And there's enormous amounts of art, everything from weaving and jewelry to painting and sculpture. When you actually get to visit campus, you'll see that there's student art everywhere. Turns out it's really hard to get rid of in the end, because it just has been piling up for about 75 years. But even students that are doing a project that seems to be about something else often have a artistic piece of how they show it off at the end. It's very wrapped into it. And then some of them are just painting projects, you know, straight up. Yeah.
Emily's not kidding about the art on the campus. It's literally embedded in the trees and in the ground in some cases. Let's keep moving because I want to give you guys your afternoon back, but not yet. Owen, where are you, Owen? You had a question.
Yeah. What happens if you don't finish your project? Can you like work on it the next project week, or do you just keep it at that and talk about what you've accomplished in that week?
You actually answered your own question. Both can happen. People will continue their project weeks sometimes into future project weeks. And if they decide to bring closure to it and it doesn't hit the goal that they initially had, as Nathan was saying before, it's really plausible, and as Emily was too, it's really plausible that you focus on what you did do and what you learned from it and what questions you'd carry forward.
John, can I riff on that just a little bit? Noah sort of referred to this earlier. Some students do very much similar projects on different topics. They are science kids or they are painters or whatever, and those things are consistent. Some students do things entirely different every time, and either one is a good option. We don't think that one is better than the other. There are students though, and this sounds a little bit like what you might have been thinking about, Owen, who are interested in one huge project. And so they bite off pieces of it for their entire time at Putney. We had a girl some years ago who came as a freshman from Cape Cod, and in about her first term decided that what she wanted to do for a career was marine biology. And we asked her if she had looked at the map before she moved from Cape Cod to Vermont. And she did all of her projects on marine mammals and water testing and the politics of oceans and currents, and every one of them had to do with marine biology. It was just a totally different topic around that one big center. And then she got a full ride to college to be a marine biologist because she had sort of built an argument of what she wanted to learn right from the time she was a freshman. So after you do a couple of projects, you kind of figure out how much you can bite off at one time, but you're free to just keep on going on the same topic if that's what you want to do later on.
Thank you.
Emily, do you remember Supawat's?
The flying jellyfish.
Oh my God, I think it was a hummingbird model or something.
No, it was a flying jellyfish.
He used like 3 different project weeks, and it was extraordinary what he was able to do over those many project weeks. I want to be sure that we're answering first questions before second questions. So Horace and Leonardo, I'm holding you guys off for a little bit. Stephanie had a question. I'm just going to read it out because her mic's not working. The students usually get the sponsor of their choice. I'm wondering if faculty ever fill up with sponsoring and can't handle more students. I know that faculty fill up on occasion, but gosh, isn't it usually the case that they're able to find their sponsor?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that's a particular challenge or issue that we've run into. Okay, Isadora gets to ask a question.
Hi, I'm wondering about if like after any students graduate or after they leave Putney, if any projects that they've like creative had been like other students have like built off of like after they've graduated. So like if previous projects have like been expanded by like other students.
I'd love to ask one of the faculty sponsors before Emily jumps in on that. Either Noah or Elena. Elena, did you have your hand up? Go.
Yeah, probably the most obvious, like visibly obvious one is the student gardens, most of which were started during Project Week, and students go off and other students take them on, or the upkeep of the student gardens. We no longer have bees. If I'm correct, we no longer have bees, but that was initially started as a Project Week, and then that was kept up within some different programs, whether that was activities or jobs or something, and other project weeks. But things come and go. That's kind of the beauty of this place. But yeah, yes, short answer, yes.
Other examples, Emily or other faculty?
What comes to mind is the mechanized loom that a number of students have passed along that I don't think is actually up and running, but they're trying to computer program a loom to do the weaving. And it's in some state in the Reynolds hallway, or has been.
Wow.
And that's been passed along to students over the years.
Cool. Angela, I don't think you've asked a question before, so jump on it.
All right, so this is kind of related to what Isadora, I think is how you pronounce her name, was saying, but are there any projects that people have continued after they graduated as like a career or a job or something like that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to that. Anybody? Elena?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm teaching here. Most of my projects are centered around. I'm an alumni. I graduated in 2010. Emily remembers me. Some of the people who are now my colleagues were my teachers, and a lot of my projects centered around being a person of color, being a woman of color in a predominantly white space, and what that meant, and also what culture meant to me. And all of those project weeks kind of culminated and sort of, planted the seed for what I did in college, and eventually decided to become a Spanish teacher and teach cooking and teach culture. And now I'm here.
Thank you, Elena. Andy, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I did a couple of project weeks with 4 Chinese students who created a film consortium, so to speak, and have been making films just endlessly, and several of them are now in film school, so they haven't necessarily started a professional career, but believe me, they will.
And you remind me of one of our students who started an ice cream, invented some ice cream, and then made it into a business. I think he sold the business. I don't think he's still doing it. Noah, were you going to jump in?
Yeah, we had a student once who did a bunch of work restoring antique tractors while he was at the school.
Sure.
And he's gone on to become a mechanic at a very large granite quarry in northern Vermont, where he's fixing the dump trucks with the tires that are as tall as a house. I mean, the really, really big giant equipment and huge excavators, the really big stuff. And it's a pretty amazing to have seen his transition from working on that old things in the shop, the farm shop at Putney, to getting into this career. That's really, it's pretty incredible.
It's a question that we can get very excited about because it does happen once in a while, but I think a lot of us on the educator side of Putney share the ideal that what you guys are learning when you're doing project weeks is going to be super applicable no matter what you decide to do with your career. The initiative, the responsibility, the perseverance, and the all important, oh my gosh, I bit off more than I could chew. I don't think I can do what I originally thought. How do I adapt? Is like, that's one of the most important capacities to build as an adult in work. Okay, I promised that we would get through first questions first. We did Horace first, then Leonardo, then we're going to be bringing this to closure.
All right, thanks. I'm wondering, how do you present your projects? You hinted on a little bit of like walking through or showing it, but once you've finished your project, how do you present it and share it with people?
Emily.
You get to decide pretty much. You're not actually required to present if you don't want to do that. Most students do want to share their work. And they can either share it on stage by speaking or dancing or doing a slideshow or whatever up on stage, or they can put their work out, or they can make an online presentation and so students can come around and look at the different presentations on a bank of computers. Really, it's up to you how you think you can best explain what you did and what you learned from it. And again, it's not required to do it, but most people do because we all like to share what